Everyone, this is Jody Grinwald, and welcome to another episode of the Today is the Day Changemakers podcast. This week's guest is kind of surreal for me, as I have followed him for about 5 years. Jason Goldberg is an award-winning entrepreneur, a phenomenal transformational coach, host of the podcast, The Jason Goldberg is Ruining Podcasting podcast, best-selling author of a book titled Prison Break. He was a TEDx speaker speaking on how to manufacture fascination and how to engineer enthusiasm. He has worked with Mindvalley, NASA, and wait for this, a former rapper who opened for the Wu-Tang Clan. Incredible. 5 years ago, I was looking for inspiration, and I found all of our favorites that are out there to listen to, including Jason. I would be driving from appointment to appointment, listening to him on his Facebook Lives or on the replay and taking in as much as I could. I was struggling back then to figure out my direction, and here I am now doing things I never thought possible. Through the help of those we may never meet, we can truly be inspired. In this case, I'm not only lucky to get to meet Jason, but now I've also had the opportunity to interview him. Thank you to Jason. Please subscribe, like, share these interviews, as you just never know who may need a message that is shared from one of my amazing guests. Have a great week, everyone. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Today is the Day Changemakers. My name is Jody Grinwald, and for those who don't know me, I am the CEO and co-founder of the Zach J. Plutter Kids Foundation. I run the Today is the Day consulting firm, and obviously we are here today for Today is the Day Changemakers podcast. Every single week, I have the most amazing people on. And today is absolutely no different. And I can't wait to share a little bit more about how I met Jason. But Jason Goldberg, I'm so happy that you're on with me today.
I'm so excited to be here. And I think it's so cool that you have a background that's positioned so that even with your head there, it still says today. It still says the word today. Even with your head splitting the word in half, it still says that. That
wasn't done on purpose at all.
That is awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Jason, I do have to read a little bit from your bio because it's exceptional and it's incredible. So you are an award-winning entrepreneur, a TEDx speaker, a baconitarian. I hope I said that correctly. Yeah. All right, cool. A funky sock lover. I've seen some of those that you've shown on social media. This one still boggles my mind. A former rapper who opened for the Wu-Tang Clan. That is like super cool. And there's no way I can ever imagine. And previously a 332-pound person, which is incredible. You are an international edutainer. I can't speak.
Got it. Nailed it.
Edutainer. All right. Awesome. And the host of the Jason Goldberg is Ruining Podcasting podcast, which I've listened to and love. And I love what your guests. Awesome. And the #1 international bestseller from Prison Break, which I have read, and creator of the Playful, Prosperity, and Competition-Proof Business Immersion programs. You've been on ABC, CBS, Fox, and the list goes on, including your partnership with NASA. So I think we covered a lot of the high points.
So a lot, I think it's too many, because only half of that stuff is true anyways. The rest of it I just made up when I was drunk one day and just threw it on paper and just kind of stuck by it.
That sounds great. So you did a great job with that. Awesome.
Thank you.
So just a real quick, I just want to give a quick background to those listening that I met you through social media because I was working in a corporate job that I was struggling with because it wasn't my passion. And then I was going through a certified professional coaching program at the time. And I looked up inspiration. I needed to have inspiration from someone. And I was looking people up. I found Lisa Nichols. I found, Brene Brown. And your name.
Oh, that was an accident. The algorithm totally screwed up on that one.
Well, I don't know, because I have this memory of me driving down the road, right? I'm literally going to my next appointment. I was working for a national nonprofit, eating a slice of pizza in the car, listening to you. And I remember thinking to myself, I just want to be like him. I just want to be able to inspire and create. And there was so much fear. And I reached out and we chatted one time during my this is like 5.5 years ago.
Wow, was it really?
That was our first conversation. And
Holy cow.
And was talking to you about how I'm trying to get out of my corporate job and get into what I love. And you were phenomenal and have always been phenomenal. But I just wanted to share that with everyone because Jason just has so much to share. And today I can't wait to talk to you about your evolution because you really have evolved over so many years. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for that. That's really, really kind of you to say all that, and I love that somehow weirdly the internet and social media brought us into each other's world at a time where it was the divine timing, which is awesome. And congrats on all that you've created in 5.5 years since that conversation. That's amazing. And as far as the evolution is concerned, I mean, it continues to evolve. I mean, I'll never be done evolving unless I really purposefully decide to stop. I don't know how that would work. Even then, I guess I'm devolving, which is still evolving. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, I mean, we can go wherever you want with that. But my evolution has gone from, being a really stressed and depressed and angry and anxious kid slash teenager slash 20-year-old, 20 something slash 30 something, all of those kind of decades of my life, I had those components that were very front and center for me. And being in corporate technology for 15 years and being 330 pounds and suicidal ideation into my late 20s. And I was put on antidepressants from the time I was about 15 or 16 until my early 30s. And so there was just all this stuff that was just kind of my default way of operating in the world, because I just wasn't exposed to anything different. It's just kind of what I picked up from, family and people around me and society at large. And that was just kind of how I lived my life. So in the same way that somebody who was raised speaking French is not dumb or wrong for not knowing how to speak Spanish, it was just not what they were exposed to. And so I was exposed to a lot of French. And so I had to go on this kind of evolutionary path through different means and different catalysts for change, if you will, that had me to start to learn Spanish. And once I learned Spanish, then I have the opportunity and the option to speak in French or Spanish in any given moment. So that's kind of having that ability to shift from what I call the prisoner perspective to the self-leader perspective is my moment by moment work now and forever.
Well, I know from, listening, obviously you were 332 pounds. You were working a job that you didn't love. And it takes a lot internally for you to flip the switch to say it's time to make a change. And I know for myself, and I'm sure lots of people in the work that you do, that don't feel that they know how to go from the place where you were to the place you are now. What do you tell those people? How do they flip the switch? I mean, it's different for each person, we know that, but how did you personally flip that switch?
Yeah, I mean, it is different for everybody. And I don't know that it's so much a switch that's flipped as much as it is a series of switches that are flipped. Right. And so because people ask me like, what was your big wake up call? And although I write about in Prison Break, the chapter 1, it's called The Day the Universe Cut Me Off. Like that was a big thing. But I would be lying if I said like that was the first time I thought something was off in my life. Like I knew things were off. I had wake up calls all the time. I just hit snooze on them. And there was just one in particular that I didn't, for some reason, I could not escape. And so I couldn't hit snooze on that one in particular. So I think the big thing here was for me to slow down and notice that I was playing a direct role in the experience of life that I had at that moment. It wasn't my bosses, it wasn't my employees, it wasn't my clients, it wasn't my mother, it wasn't my significant other, it wasn't society, it wasn't any of these things that were so easy to blame. And that was kind of one of my mantras growing up is like, who can I blame? Like not taking personal responsibility. So the first step is taking personal responsibility, but not shaming and blaming yourself in the process. Because a lot of times it's like when you hear take personal responsibility, it means beat yourself up for not having realized this thing earlier and now shame yourself into change and transformation. And that does work. That can work. But I say that's like kind of swimming laps in a pool of hot lava. Like you'll get a great workout, but you're going to die in the process, right? So it's like it doesn't actually serve you in the long run. So I think the first step is having that awareness of like, there's something that feels off in my life and no one's coming to save me. There's a really great story that Steve Chandler used to tell me back in the day about when he worked with a psychotherapist called Nathaniel Branden, who's amazing. He wrote a book called The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem and just really amazing work. And there was this group that came together for this group therapy session. And Nathaniel Branden writes up on the whiteboard, no one is coming. Like no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to make it happen for you. No one's coming to make it easier. No one's coming. And somebody raises their hand and says, but Dr. Branden, you came. And he goes, but I just came to tell you no one's coming. And so it always goes back to the fact that like, it really is, doesn't mean you shouldn't get support. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have a support system. Doesn't mean you shouldn't lean on people and get mentorship or get coaching or just have friends that help you with things. But even all of that is still an exercise of personal responsibility.
I kind of call what a lot of people live on is like cruise control, like the cruise control society. You set the speed every day. You wake up, you do the same thing.
You know, we'll go to work, come back, and that the feelings and the being in touch with yourself and the self-awareness, a lot of people shut that down, shut that off. And I think what I meant by switch was you have to turn on the light inside yourself in order to be able to see what's going on. And not everybody can do that. And what you also said, because I say this too, is that nobody's knocking at the door saying, okay, I'm here, I'm going to fix everything for you. You're going to be great now. It really is about finding yourself. And a lot of people have used this crisis that we're in to go inward, which I think more people need to do that in many cases, because unfortunately, a lot of people are numb. And the work, and it's so wonderful, the work that you share, because you're so open. And I think that was why I connected so much with you, was because you were just real.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, and it's one of the challenges. It's not something that I do strategically, but it is something that I feel, I guess for myself, is what was missing when I was looking to personal growth people, is that it was very much a sage on the stage kind of industry. And I know that if I have a close friend who I really trust and they tell me, you've got this, you're going to be okay, it holds way more weight than somebody who's like this massive figure on a stage who has hundreds of millions of followers and they're saying you can do it. It just doesn't, I don't feel the same level of connection to that message. And so for me, I think it's a disservice to not share that the work that I'm doing with others is always the work that I'm also doing on myself. And if nothing else, I hope that gives people an indicator of, well, if this moron can do it, then I should be able to figure something out myself as well. So yeah, I'll always share my own journey because I think it's a disservice not to.
Definitely not a moron. I definitely think, no, we're not going to say that. It's something you gave me, a little bit of advice one time in one of our text messages or, through message or whatever, was about having to take away that professionalism and allowing yourself, because we put armor on. The more titles we get, I feel like the more we start going underneath all of this armor that we put on. Yeah. And then we forget to just allow people to see who we truly, truly are, because we're afraid we'll be judged, right? Judgment and vulnerability, two major topics that are talked about a lot. Anything you can share about those two things that I think are just so important? And through the podcast, I've been talking a lot about judgment and vulnerability.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, well, so going back to, yes. So I was actually just coaching a client about this yesterday, and it's this weird thing, like, this will tie back into vulnerability in a sense, but you said something right before that I wanted to key into as well. It's like, wanting to make big changes in your life or the professionalism thing and kind of the identity we step into. Those identities can be really amazing and really debilitating for us. And if we attach to the identity and make it the center of our universe, it doesn't usually serve us. If it's something we use and it inspires us and it drives us forward and allows us to serve, then it's great. So I was coaching a client on this yesterday, and she was getting really, really emotional about just a kind of a darkness she's feeling right now and having some troubles in her business and what she's working on. And she was just, crying, saying like, this is my mission. Like, if I can't make this happen and I would have to go back to a job or like live with my parents, like I would rather die. And I asked her, I checked in on her language and said, is that true? Would you rather really die than go do this thing? Yes, because this is my mission and I need to make this change. And she's crying and I feel it. Like I have so much compassion for that, because I'm also really inspired by and want to do anything I can to move my own mission forward. But in that moment, it was really clear to me that her attachment and significance to the identity of somebody who has a mission is crushing her. So if you have an identity and it's a well-meaning identity, but it's crushing you, we need to take a step back and shift from ego into service. Because at the end of the day, as Nancy Klein says in her book, More Time to Think, we're both essential and irrelevant on this planet. We're essential and irrelevant, right? So yes, it is essential. Like the work that you are doing with this podcast and everything else you're doing in your business, absolutely essential, absolutely needed. Such a powerful shift for the world to experience. And if you died tomorrow and the entire company fell apart and nobody ever carried your work forward, the world would still go on, right? So being able to live in that middle ground of what I'm doing is so important. I'm so attached to it. This identity of, what I say, being an activist, like no matter what your work is, like be an activist around it, whatever that is, that's great. It's essential. Put all of your sincerity into it. And at the same time, hold paradox that it actually doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And if we put too much significance and too much pressure on that identity, then we actually don't serve the mission to begin with, and everything falls apart. So I wanted to bring that up just because the professionalism thing is something that I think people are a lot of times are so tied up in. I have to look a certain way. I have to, when I first started, I wore like a suit and tie when I was doing my videos. Cause I'm like, that's what a professional coach looks like. Well, you know what? Professional wrestlers wear makeup on their face and the guys are wearing Speedos and nothing else. So like that can be professional too. It's about sincerity about the work you're doing, not about being buttoned up and looking some certain way. So I know it's probably a tangent, but that was present for me that I wanted to share.
No, I'm so glad you did. But it stuck with me. It has, and I've become much more playful because of it. And I've really been able to show who I am in a much different way instead of being that buttoned up, you got to wear the collar and the blazer. And it's because of what society says, but it doesn't mean we have to follow that. We are allowed to be who we are. And that's why I keep saying, stop wearing the camouflage of the title and start allowing yourself to be who you are, which is wonderful. What do you enjoy most about all the amazing work that you do? Because you do so many different things. You're a speaker, you're all over the place. You do such great work with your clients. And what is it that really stands out for you that you enjoy the most?
Well, I mean, it's two things, right? It's one is an extremely selfish one, and one is only a partially selfish one. So the partially selfish one is seeing some kind of insight or some kind of transformation happen in the person that's across from me, or the people that are across from me, or the people that watch my stuff, or whatever it is. Because my one-line business plan is to leave everybody I meet with at least 5% more joy than I found them. So as long as I'm seeing that, I'm getting some kind of feedback on that, then egotistically that feels good for me. But of course, it's of service to other people. It's not like I'm getting an ego hit off of kicking puppies across a room. It's, it's being of service. So that's the one that's partly egoic. The one that's fully egoic is I just love to know that I've created something, that I've taken something from the formless world and brought it into the world of form. I'm obsessed, especially now lately, I'm obsessed with the creative process. I'm obsessed with the resistance around the creative process. I'm obsessed around what actually drives people to create and what actually drives them to distract themselves away from creation. And there's just something, I was actually just kind of free writing, journaling about this morning. There's something about sitting back and looking at something you've created from nothing and the level of fulfillment and satisfaction that's involved in being a creator. So for me, being a creator is one of them, and then being of service is the other.
Do you think you really know exactly how impactful you've been to so many people? And I know that's like a closed-ended question, but I kind of want you to elaborate on that thought process.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I'm always torn on this, because I know from the people who obviously reach out and share with me that they've experienced that. And that's still very hard for me to receive. Like I love it and I push it away at the same time. I don't know what it is. That's a weird thing. But so I know that's there. And I'm sure there are people that I'll never, ever hear from who have been impacted by the work, but something about that, I don't know, sometimes that drives me, and sometimes it feels too egotistical, and I don't want to identify with somebody who's making all this change, because it takes the power away from people on two sides. Number one, it takes the power away from people where they didn't create the change for themselves, but also it sets up an unrealistic expectation for myself that I'm responsible for people's change. So I'm grateful if anybody watches something that I create or I coach them and something happens and their world is even slightly different after that. That's beautiful, and I'm so happy about that. But I try not to think too much about how far and wide that's spread.
Yeah, because that could actually be, I can see that being overwhelming. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I'm grateful for it. Like it's a great problem to have, to feel like there are a lot of people impacted by the thing. But again, I think that can also play into the identity of, I was having a conversation about this with a friend of mine a couple of days ago, who's going to be on my podcast next week. And we were talking about just flow and inspiration and all that stuff. And I realized that I have had this identity of like a prolific content creator, and how sometimes that can actually, shut down my creativity, because it goes from me creating from an inspired place to me creating in order to get some kind of outcome. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing. And I actually, again, part of my kind of free writing this morning is I'm not going to, as often as possible, I'm not going to talk about looking for inspiration anymore. Because to me, inspiration isn't something, when I'm at my best, inspiration isn't something that's given to me. It's something that I give to what I'm doing, right? The root of inspire is to breathe into, right? So what can I breathe life into? The person in front of me, the person I'm coaching, the piece of content I'm writing, the video I'm creating, the whatever it is that I'm doing. How can I breathe life into that thing? How can I, if life is a flat, pool raft, how can I like fill it up with my air and my essence so that it's fully expanded to its full capabilities? So that's really my goal now, is how can I create from a place where I'm breathing life into the work, as opposed to trying to get the work to breathe life into me.
It makes perfect sense, because I feel like if we come from a place where we are trying so hard to inspire someone, we can paralyze ourselves, because
Totally.
with worrying about the judgment of whether it's going to happen or not going to happen. And that's a lot of weight to carry when you're trying to serve. So
absolutely. It's debilitating. It's absolutely debilitating. It stops people from getting started. And that's probably the number one thing. You know, if I told you that you were going to, do a Facebook Live, but you were doing it on a desert island where nobody was ever going to even have like Wi-Fi to be able to see it, it was just going to be on your phone and nobody would ever see it again, or at all, would you have the same level of fear of doing a Facebook Live? And the answer is typically no. And it's like, well, what changes? I mean, just the fact that people are watching it, what does it matter what their perception is? You can't possibly gauge or guarantee that the impact and the intent of what you're doing will match up. That's out of my control. My message is for whoever it's for, and it's not for whoever it's not for.
I can't agree more on this, because when I first launched the podcast, and I didn't launch it 5 years ago because I was afraid nobody was going to follow, who's going to come on, all of those things, right? And then I started to look at the numbers, and they're not exactly what you want sometimes when you first launch, and you're like, then you just have to say whoever, even if it's one person, whoever is supposed to hear it is going to hear it. And I think that's not just for a podcast, that's in anything, any presentation, anything that we do. Connect with one person and you've changed, you've made change in some way. And place of service, I think, is so vital and important.
This episode of the Today is the Day Changemakers podcast is sponsored by the Zach G. Applaud Our Kids Foundation. The Zach G. Applaud Our Kids Foundation provides 100% funding to children living with financial barriers to take ongoing lessons in dance, acting, instrumental music, and vocal instruction. The Applaud Our Kids Foundation is hosting their yearly scholarship showcase on Sunday, May 23rd at 3 p.m. The children who are taking lessons through the organization's funding will take the stage and share their talents. For tickets, please go to applaudourkids.org.
What is your favorite presentation or talk that you've ever given, that you walked off the stage and just felt, wow, that was incredible?
That's a good question. What's the one I'm most proud of? I mean, it touched
your heart, even like you saw the audience and you were just on the ride. They were on the ride with you. Yeah.
I mean, thankfully I've had a lot of those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually the one that sticks out right now is probably the last talk that I did before the world shut down, was the very end of 2019 in Seattle. I did a talk for 600 vacation planners, people in vacation planning industry. Right. And it was one of my best friends who had passed away a year prior, earlier that year. He had spoken at that event the year before. And I asked the organizers, because they loved him so much, I asked the organizers if we could do a tribute to him at the end. And he was known for dance parties. This was a guy called Sean Stevenson.
I know him.
Yeah, amazing guy. And so I asked if we could do a dance party at the end of my talk, like if we could reserve some time at the end for him. And they said yes. So the talk itself was great. And people were really into it. And then being able to have that moment at the end where we brought him up on the screen and we played one of his favorite songs and we had the whole audience dancing, that was just a beautiful moment of just realness and authenticity and connection. And everybody in that room, the majority of people in that room had seen him speak the year before. And so that one really sticks out to me.
You introduced me to him through one of your talks that you did. And I listened to him, and I had a life-changing moment. I had to go to Pittsburgh for work, and I was really struggling with going because something was going on with my daughter. And I listened to him. I asked for a sign, and you had introduced on one of your talks about him. So I went in and I found one of his one of the things he talked at, and I don't remember which one it was. I apologize. And he talked about creating this alter ego and giving it a name and having this person react and without having to worry about any of the things that you're personally worried about, judgment or whatever it is, creating this alter ego and what would this other person do? And I was tortured about my decision about going to Pittsburgh, leaving my daughter at that point for work. And it was kind of mandatory that I go. And after I listened to the podcast, that talk that he gave, I didn't go. And I was able to say no. And so I really connected with him multiple times, just through listening to him because of you. And when I saw that he passed, I cried myself. And because he gave me a lot. He didn't even know me. I never got a chance to meet him. But just when you listen to people, you connect with them, sometimes you feel like you know them, So I'm so sorry for the loss of your friend. I really, truly am.
He lived an amazing life and impacted a whole lot of people really deeply, including me. And I just love that so much of his work is available online and people can continue to watch his talks and his amazingness. And if you haven't checked him out, go check him out. It's the Sean, that's S-E-A-N. There's also one that's S-H-A-W-N, Sean Stevens. And he's great too, actually. He's a good friend of mine. But the other one, the S-E-A-N, is the one you want to check out. Really inspirational stuff.
So Jason, you went from being in the corporate world to where you are today. How did you find your new tribe, right? I call them your tribe, those who you surround yourself with, because that's a very different from where you were before to where you are now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 1,000%. So, I mean, the thing, my viewpoint on tribes is that they're not built, at least not by any one person. They're created around a central idea, and they're an aggregation point for people who have a similar belief system. And then people who then say they, quote, have a tribe. So if I were to say I have a tribe, if I'm being more accurate about this, I raised my hand and said, here's what I believe in. And if you're one of those weirdos who believes in the same thing I do, guess what? We're automatically tribe. There's no like indoctrination process. We're already there. Like I tell people this all the time. If you would go to a networking event, back again when we can do networking events, but if you had gone to a networking event, I hated networking events because they just felt very superficial. And it wasn't even that I was upset with the superficial stuff, because I understand that you can't get to the bottom of the ocean until you penetrate the surface of the ocean. So sometimes you have surface level talk to go deep, and that's totally fine. But it just felt like the intention was never to get there. It was always to kind of stay on the surface, which again is fine for some people, and that leads them to business, and that's great, and that's their intention, and I have no problem with that. It just wasn't right for me. And I say now that if I had a chance to go back and I really didn't give a crap and I just wanted to like play with something, I would go into a networking event. I would pull out a chair. I would stand on the chair and I would say, who here is a fan of the TV show Lost? That's all I would say. And I guarantee, were you a fan of the show, by the way?
No.
Okay, but that's fine. That's perfect. But I guarantee in a room of 100 people, there would be 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 people who were like, oh my God, I was a huge Lost fan. Immediately we're a tribe, and we've just dropped into a new level of connection and intimacy that we couldn't have done any other way strategically or in a manufactured fashion. So for me, that's what tribe, quote, building is all about, is asking yourself, what is your version of weird? What is your belief system? What are your quirks? What is it that lights you up? What is it that pisses you off? Like, figure out what it is that you really care about and what you resonate with, and then just say, hey, here's what I care about. Here's what I resonate with. Anybody else with me? And whoever says, yeah, that's me too, then you found your tribe.
See, and look at how simple that is, that you just put that in, just so simple, and people don't utilize that. And it's funny. So I do train organizations on really effective networking, because I'm just like you, I feel very strongly about that. So one of the things I just did recently with a group was, well, how does your very first job, like I'm talking babysitter, mowing the lawn, whatever it is, how does that compare to what you're doing right now? Like, what are some of the similarities between the two? They had a blast, like ice cream scooper, like, they're all dressed up, they're buttoned up, they got their blazers going on and everything, from the waist up in the virtual world.
You're right, yeah.
And, but everybody was laughing and hysterical, and we're thinking about like, here's Joe somebody, we're all buttoned up and everything, and here he was mowing somebody's lawn, or whatever it was that they were doing, pool, cleaning the pool, and we had a really good time with it.
That's awesome.
Exactly what you say.
I love that. So playful. I love anything that's a playful approach. I absolutely love.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that and being playful, because you're teaching other people how to do that. That's really, really cool. So now, you've been through some challenges, and I know you've shared some of your things that you've gone through, and you've been so open. And again, I applaud you for that, because it helps those of us who are dealing with our own things as well. And what do you have to say to those people who feel like right now, because they're going through something terrible, tragic, whether it's a divorce, whether it's loss of a job, whatever it is, what do you tell them about this time and how to move forward when they're feeling very stuck?
Yeah. So the first thing here, and the thing that, again, I'm trying to practice as much as possible in my own life, is not putting an additional burden on ourselves by having an additional story about what this thing that's happening in the world of form actually means, right? So for example, like it's to say the truth, the fact of the matter that you're going through a divorce is the fact of the matter. the story about what that says about you or about your future or about your partner or about whatever else, that's where the actual suffering comes from, right? Is an attachment to the story. So I'm not at all, I would never trivialize what it feels like to go through those things, because I've gone through them all. I've gone through divorce. I've gone through all these different things. And what I know for myself, when I was going through my divorce and when I felt, it's funny how often we use words like tragedy or devastation to describe things like losing a job or, a divorce happening. Those words don't mean that in the grand scheme of things. And oftentimes as humans, we swap out, and I've definitely done this myself, discomfort for devastation. It's not devastating to go through a divorce. It's uncomfortable as hell. Absolutely. I mean, does it feel like it rocks the core of your universe? For sure. But you are not devastated by that unless you choose to create a story that says you are devastated by it. And I remember when I was going through my divorce, and I was talking to my coach at one point, and he was inviting me to feel all the feelings, which I think is very important. I would never tell anybody or expect anybody to spiritually bypass and try to reframe their sad feelings. Like, we don't want to make our emotions wrong, because our emotions are never wrong. Whatever you're feeling, you're supposed to be feeling based on your perspective of the thing going on. So acknowledging that I'm sad, but what I was invited to consider was to get clear on the source of my sadness. So for the divorce, I thought that the source of my sadness, the source of my feeling of hopelessness or despair around the divorce was because of the divorce. Like, oh my God, this is, I can't believe this is happening. This is terrible. My life is over. And the invitation to look at the truth of the matter was I wasn't mourning the marriage. I was mourning the expectation that I thought I was in a partnership for life. Right. And that may seem like a very, very small shift, but to say that I am devastated because a person left me is different than saying I am upset because my expectation of a lifelong relationship was not followed through on, was not met. It's a whole different thing to process. And so I had that kind of invitation to consider. And honestly, when I first heard it, it didn't feel possible for me to do it. It felt so out of reach for me. And right after that call, I had a call with a friend, and I was telling this friend, like, yeah, I just feel so down, and I can't believe she did this to me, and I feel like she's ruined my life. And my friend started reflecting back to me in a very loving, compassionate way, just to be there for me. She said, you're right. She ruined it. Like, now you have to start all over. And like, how dare she just completely devastate your life? And she's reflecting all these things back to me. And as she's reflecting them, I'm going, wait a second. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm not starting over. Like, I was alive and I was a human for 20 plus years before I ever met her. And I'm still here alive and well, and I'm still in a safe place, and I still have food in the refrigerator, and I still have friends and family and work. And like, I have all these things. And it wasn't until she reflected back to me that I was like, oh, wait, that's absolutely not the truth of what's going on. So what I invite people to do is, again, you'll see this a lot from me, is to hold paradox, to allow yourself to be in the both and. In the same way, we're both essential and irrelevant. And so we should focus on our mission, but not be too attached to the identity of the significance of that mission. I think the same thing applies here. Feel your feelings, allow them to be there. Don't try to push them away, but be really clear that the degree to which you put significance on those feelings, or the degree to which you create a serious story about what those feelings mean about you, that will dictate your experience of those things. So really being able to slow down and say, okay, I'm going to allow this thing to be here. Yes, I feel the presence of sadness right now, and I don't have a story about that. I don't mind it. It can stay as long as it needs to. I don't need to fight it away. Whenever sadness is ready to leave, it can leave. And the more I have that dialogue with myself, honestly, the faster sadness goes away by itself.
That is so important, because the self-talk that people, they don't understand what they're saying to themselves sometimes. A silly, but bring it down to even a little bit more brass tacks, is that I spilt water all over the counter the other day. And I, we do it all the time, right? That's very normal. But in my head, you know what I said to myself? God, what an idiot. You're in a rush. You got to go somewhere. You know what I mean? What a klutz. Now's not the time. And I'm like, I literally stopped for a second as I was cleaning it up, saying, what am I saying to myself? Like, I have clients that I talk to about this all the time, the way, pay attention to the way you talk to yourself. And it could be simple as dropping a cup of water, that you could all of a sudden change your entire day by calling yourself names and making it a bigger deal than it needs to be. And the fact that what was so beautiful that you just said was that as that person that you're talking to kind of was spewing back to you what they thought they heard you say, which you did not say.
Right.
That was their perception.
Right.
But that was able to kind of knock you out of thinking, well, wait a minute. maybe it's not as bad as what I'm thinking. Maybe I need a little bit more perspective. So
Yeah.
that's really great. And that's what I know that we're both working on, trying to get people to become more self-aware of their thought process and what they're saying to themselves.
It's all we have. I mean, Byron Katie says a clear, calm mind always knows what to do next. So the focus should not be on solving problems. The focus should be on getting ourselves back to a state of equanimity. And so, as Katie talks about, if it was not for our thoughts or what we're thinking and believing in the moment, we'd be absolutely peaceful. Like if I'm sitting here and I'm just completely stressed out about something happening in the future, and then somebody like hits me in the side of the head with a frying pan, like on, Tom and Jerry, and all of a sudden I have short-term amnesia, I wouldn't be stressed anymore, but nothing will have changed in the outside world. But yet all of a sudden I'm not worried. So if me not knowing about the problem means that it no longer stresses me, then it's not the problem that stresses me, it's my story about the problem that stresses me. So the more I can really slow down and ask myself, like, the spilling the water thing is so great, because one of the things you said in there that was actually helpful is, you said you had all this negative self-talk, but you mentioned in there about like rushing around, right? So it is very possible that when these things happen, we ask ourselves, what is that thing trying to illuminate for me in my life? And so when we're in this slow down space, we may respond and say, oh, you know what? Whenever I'm rushing around, I tend to spill things and drop things. Good to notice, right? Good to notice that's illuminating something without it being about me or making me into a bad person. So I try to treat these things, again, all the time, except for the times I don't, like the gas gauge on your car, right? So when you're driving on the road and you have the gas gauge pop up on your car, the little gas light pop up on your car saying you're low on fuel, you would never say, what a stupid effing car. What do you mean you're low on gas? You're such a piece of crap. I put gas in you 2 weeks ago. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you out to get me? Why can't you just do what I want you to do? Nobody says that to their car. They say, oh, thank goodness I have an indicator on the car telling me I'm low on fuel so I can go get gas. And the great thing about the little light on the dashboard is that it doesn't pop up when you're out of gas. It pops up when you have like 30 or 40 miles left in the tank. So it gives you runway to be able to take the steps you need to take to refill the tank. These same things, whether it's spilling water or it's a client not signing up with you, or it's a divorce, or it's an argument with a friend, whatever it is, this is trying to illuminate, hey, something may be off right now in your thinking. I gently guide you back to center in the next 30 or 40 miles.
So then everybody who's listening to this needs to think of, when that happens, they need to think of the gaslight, because that was a great way to share that. And now I'll be utilizing that too, saying, okay, this is I need to stop for a second and go get some gas.
That's it.
And refill the tank.
That's it. And it's still, and I don't want to hear anybody writing and saying, well, I have an electric car. Your battery depletes. It's the same thing.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that caveat for me, because I don't want to get any of those people writing in. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your podcast. The Jason Goldberg is Ruining Podcasting podcast. So what's up with the name? It's so cool.
It was really funny. So my team, my production team, when we were planning it all out, and I brought them a list of like 12 names, and that was one of the names I put in totally as like a joke. And I thought there was 3 others that I thought were going to be the main contenders when we were going through all of them. And the two of the guys that run the company that I hired, they looked at each other and they said, I like the Ruining podcast. And I'm like, really? I was like, I mean, to me, that's hilarious, but I don't know if that's something that would actually play. And they said, well, tell us more about that. Like why that as a name? And once I explained it to them, they said, yeah, no, you have to do that. So, the goal for me is that I'm kind of a contrarian whenever possible, especially in this industry. Personal growth is typically very serious. I want to make it playful. People are typically or historically have been very buttoned up and had a certain identity that they wanted to present to be the sage on the stage. I'm going to be the guy who's real and shares whatever is going on in his life and doesn't hold back. So my whole thing is like, I'm trying to ruin all these different things in the world. And one of the things is I figure, why not ruin podcasts and bring more, comedy, bring more of a late night feel, do things that are unconventional, film it on my couch, have plastic microphones in between us for mic drop moments, get people to come in and cook, make smoothies in my kitchen with me because I have nothing in my kitchen because I have no idea how to cook. Like all these things that maybe wouldn't be traditional. It's meant to be a larger message that says, we all have the ability to ruin stuff in the world. And when I say ruin, what I mean is to do things in a way that may be improbable, that may be unpopular, that may be even seemingly impossible, but still to give it a try, just so you're doing something that really feels in alignment with you, even if it's not the traditional way it's always been done.
That's awesome. So when did you launch? It's pretty new, right?
It's pretty new. Yeah. I think we've done, I don't know how many we've released right now, but we've recorded, I think 11 episodes. I think we've released like 8 or 9 right now, but we've recorded 11 episodes. So yeah, it's just launched maybe like end of December, I want to say, or middle of December. So yeah, it's been like a month and a half. It's been great.
So how do people find it?
So if they go to thejasongoldberg.com, thejasongoldberg.com/podcast, you'll find it. Or if you search on YouTube, I recommend YouTube for the video experience because we have a full-blown production and it's really fun to watch. So you can go on YouTube and you'll find it there, or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. But if you search for the Jason Goldberg is Ruining Podcasting podcast, or actually you just search for Jason Goldberg, I think I'm one of 2 people that come up, and you'll see my face, so you'll know it's me.
That's awesome. And how about if they want to find you otherwise, not the podcast, but they want to learn more about you? Where can they go?
Yeah, Instagram is the best place to go. I hang out on Instagram and Facebook a lot. Instagram's typically easier. So it's at the Jason Goldberg, THE, the Jason Goldberg. And we can continue the conversation there. I share a bunch of content and do a bunch of fun stuff, and you can hit me up there.
I love that. It's the Jason Goldberg.
The Jason Goldberg. It's because Jason Goldberg was taken across all platforms. It was taken. So I'm like, all right, what's the most pretentious thing that I can do? And I was like, the Jason Goldberg, that will make me humble.
You could have said the best Jason. You could have really gone for it,
I really could. The one and only. My original name was going to be the one and only. Everybody else who says it's their name is a fake Jason Goldberg, but there's a limit on characters on Instagram, so I couldn't do that.
Yeah, that would not go. That would not work. That would not work. So I ask every person, every guest, this question. If you knew then what you know now, what would that be? And it could be a couple of things. It doesn't just have to be one.
Yeah. I mean, if I think back to kind of my darkest moments, suicidal ideation, 332 pounds, crying on the floor of my closet in the morning because my clothes were so tight and so uncomfortable, stressing out, working 70, 80 hours a week in my corporate job. I think what I would say to myself is actually, it's a quote actually from Napoleon Hill that I love. And he says, nothing which life has to offer is worth the cost of worry. Nothing which life has to offer is worth the cost of worry. So no matter what accolades or what relationship you'd love, or how much money you'd love to make, or how big a business you'd like to have, or what impact you'd like to make in the world, nothing that life has to offer is worth the cost of worry. So that's one thing for sure. Another thing would be, honestly, probably wisdom from Sadhguru. It's very, very rare that I quote my own wisdom. Sadhguru has this really beautiful sentiment where he says to loosen your grip on life. And essentially what he's saying there is that, the only reason that we as humans are sad, depressed, or whatever else is because we essentially don't know how to walk through life joyfully. We're really good at making misery out of everything. And if you live in a place where you can make misery out of anything, you can never do the right thing. And if you're in a place where you can walk joyfully through the world, you can never do the wrong thing. And so having this understanding that I am life, and all these other things, my thoughts, my body, my business, my relationships, everything, those are accessories to life. And accessories are there to embellish and to make things more beautiful, like women wearing earrings or men wearing, chains or whatever. They're accessories to life. They're there to make life even brighter, but they are not to be confused with life. And so really understanding that we are at our core life, and safe and loved and supported and taken care of, baseline, done, full stop. Everything else is an accessory to life. And if I had known that back then, I would have put a lot less pressure on myself. And I probably would have been, I would have been a lot more kind to myself.
Well, I hope what you just said helps somebody who may be sitting there today, and dealing with that, and to know that there's others who felt that way, feel that way, and can come out the other side and do amazing and beautiful things. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For JG.
So, continue with the podcast. And then I have some other kind of top secret things that I can't talk about yet because they're kind of in process. So I don't want to jinx them or anything like that. But there's definitely a shift, mainly because of the show. There's definitely a shift where there are some opportunities on the entertainment front. I really feel like my greatest level of contribution is going to be to take what I have somehow stumbled into having some proficiency around, which is bringing some levity and some lightness to this whole personal growth thing. That my goal is to be on as big a platform as possible to do that, and to bring this to people who are not necessarily necessarily immersed in personal growth yet, and to do it in a way that makes it really accessible. That's really my goal, is to bring this kind of thing to as many people as possible, because I didn't have access to it growing up, and I think it's a disservice that more people don't have access to it now. So yeah, that's kind of my goal, is like, how can I just spread these ideas, whether they're mine or anybody else's? How can I spread these ideas to as many people as possible?
Well, I can't wait. I'm waiting to see you on, like, the big screen, and not the small. I'm telling you, I know it's kind of, I can feel it. And any chance you're going to rap again? I mean, we all want to know.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually, so I mean, I still do it as a part of my keynotes when I would, again, when we were on stages, I would do kind of spoken word kind of things on stages. And it was actually funny. A really dear friend of mine's 30th birthday was the weekend before last. Mine was last weekend. Hers was the weekend before that. And I actually wrote a rap just for her birthday, like all about her. And it was really fun to get back into the flow of writing. And so I've really been thinking lately, I've actually been thinking of using TikTok just for rap, because I'm not on TikTok at all, right? Like, I consume, but I don't post. And I was thinking about using TikTok as a way just to start rapping again. There'll be no personal growth element attached to it. It would just be me rapping. So it's very possible that I'll do that again, just as a creative outlet.
Oh, I really hope you do, because I've seen you do something. I've watched some things where you've done a little bit of here and there, and you truly are an edutainer. I mean, without a doubt. But you're an entertainer too, because you're just so much fun. And I've heard you sing. So can people find you singing anywhere? Is that anywhere?
There's some videos out there. I didn't post them, but there are videos out there that people have posted from Mindvalley events where I've done it. And I don't know where they are. I don't know if you can maybe search Mindvalley, Jason Goldberg, and see if any of those come up. But there are so many times I've done stuff on stage across the world with them, but I don't have any videos personally. So I need to start finding those and putting them somewhere.
Absolutely. I have a question for you. Awesome Fest.
Yeah.
You've been there, right?
I host it. I MC it. Yeah. So yeah, it's A Fest. They've dropped the awesomeness. It used to be called Awesomeness Fest. Now it's A Fest. And we are hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll be back this year. So as of now, we are still tentative for this October in Jordan, in the Middle East, for the next A Fest. So if you haven't checked it out before, go to afest.com. I think it's just A Fest, all one word. I don't think it's A-Fest. afest.com. It's an amazing event put on by Mindvalley. Used to be twice a year, switched to once a year. Last year it was 0 times a year. And it's 400 people, typically entrepreneurs or people that have some flexibility in their schedule, who go to a beautiful country for 4 days. And there's TEDx kind of talks during the day and Burning Man style parties at night. And you just make the greatest connections in the world. And it's beautiful.
It's on the bucket list for me. I've been following.
You'd love it.
I would so love it. So I don't know about this year because, times are tough, but hopefully I'm hoping, and I'm glad that there's hoping that it'll be October. So we'll see. I'll be following. I don't think it's ever been in the United States, right? It's always out somewhere else.
It's always overseas. Yeah. The closest it's been to the United States would be like Costa Rica and Mexico were the two closest to the US, but typically it's either in Europe. We've done it a couple times in Southeast Asia, but mainly Europe or the Caribbean.
Oh, Caribbean sounds fun. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. Anything else that you want to share before we go? I really want to thank you for being a part of this podcast with me.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And I appreciate the work that you're doing here and outside of the podcast as well. And I guess just right now, the message I have for people is really just to allow your feelings to be without them being a nuisance. The more we can practice being okay with whatever we're feeling and not judging it and not trying to get rid of it, the closer we are to true mental health and to peace. And just be nice to yourself. Just, God, 2020 was a crazy year. A lot of crazy stuff that no one's ever dealt with before. It's really easy to beat yourself up if things aren't going the way you want them to go. And if beating yourself up was going to work, it would have worked by now. So stop doing that and love yourself a little more instead.
Oh, that was really great. Yeah, if it would have worked by now, if it was supposed to work. Perfectly said. So I hope you'll come back on and give us an update on all the things you're doing.
Would love that. Thanks for having me, Jody.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to say what I always say at the end of every podcast for everybody to remember. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what steps, large or small, are you taking today to get yourself closer to your goals? Again, Jason, thank you so much. You've been such an inspiration to me, and I so appreciate it. And we'll see you next week on the pod. Today is the Day Changemakers podcast. Yay!